Forensic science, the study of evidence discovered at a crime scene and used in a court of law. Since the beginning of time, the human thirst for knowledge has made us question what, where, and when in all matters. When confronted with the death of a person, this is even more important, as we have to justify and dignify the loss of a loved one in a way that we can accept and understand. As far back as the 13th century, several cultures have used what we now identify as forensic science to solve the issues of death and crime. Today, in the 21st century, the scientist can make the bones speak. Organizations like FAFG combine several scientific branches such as forensic anthropology, archaeology, genetics, and social anthropology, tools that make it possible to determine all sorts of information about a body that no longer breathes.
Tenemos esa importante misión.
What we do is make sure that every step of this multidisciplinary system for human identification remains is followed. FAFG experts in forensic anthropology, social anthropology, forensic archaeology, and criminology make sure the system works, that we have obtained all the remains, and that the information has been analyzed with the sole purpose of identifying the victim.
A last breath, in whatever manner this might have happened, means the end of human existence. But it is only the beginning of a long and arduous process for the scientists who dedicate their lives to tracing the last steps of the deceased, and in many cases, reuniting remains with their loved ones.
I work here because I personally believe in the work that we do. I believe that it's important. I believe that every family member that lost someone has the right to get it back and to know what happened to their disappeared. And I personally believe that we do an important work in this specific type of cases.
Perhaps the most spoken about and mysterious achievement is the capturing and analysis of the DNA in a little bit of hair, saliva, or minute cell. That will reveal the identity of a person who has ceased to exist or needs to be found. However, as important as this fact and achievement is, it is only one of many facets of discovering the whole truth of the manner in which someone has passed. Physical evidence cannot be intimidated. It does not forget. It sits there and waits to be detected, preserved, evaluated, and explained.
The important thing here is that DNA is not magic. DNA is an incredible tool, but we need to know how to use that tool. And we also need to complement that tool with a lot of information that comes from the investigators, the cultural anthropologists, the archaeologists, and also from the forensic anthropologists.
The science is certain, but then why is it not used for all cases?
Although DNA has become the ultimate tool for identifying someone, whether they be a victim or a perpetrator of a crime, it doesn't work alone, and it's not the only way of identifying someone. You only rely on DNA after you looked at fingerprints or dental records or even medical records. So there are many ways you can identify someone before you get to DNA. In Guatemala, however, we don't have dental records of the victims or medical records of the victims, so we have to rely on what the families tell us.
DNA technology could be the greatest single advance in the search for truth, conviction of the guilty, and acquittal of the innocent since the advent of cross-examination. But the reality is that for many countries, forensic anthropology and genetics remain as fictional as the storylines of those fancy Hollywood shows. However, that is not the case for countries like Guatemala, where for over 20 years, the members of the Guatemalan Forensic Anthropology Foundation have been working to shed light onto some of the darkest moments of a violent past, helping those who lost so much without ever knowing the answer to what happened to my loved ones.
It's not only about finding the family members and returning them to their surviving victims so that they can close the painful circle of grieving, but it's also so they know what happened. That is vital for the transition of the justice system away from the armed conflict. People are asking for restitution and for the return of dignity for their loved ones, for justice and truth so these violent episodes that happened in Guatemala do not repeat themselves.
The Guatemalan Forensic Anthropology Foundation is a scientific, non-governmental, non-profit, autonomous organization that contributes to the strengthening of a justice system and respect for human rights through the investigation, documentation, dissemination, education, and awareness raising regarding past and present human rights violations, particularly massacres, extrajudicial executions, and enforced disappearances. FAFG also supports the efforts of the Attorney General's Office in the investigation of high-profile criminal cases.
The Guatemalan Forensic Anthropology Foundation has for years supported the victims' rights to know, and thanks to the exhumations and now the DNA process, the victims' surviving relatives of missing persons have managed to recover the bodies of their loved ones, and that is a great contribution to Guatemala. And all of the evidence that has been recovered through exhumations and DNA evidence and historical research carried out by the FAFG have been invaluable to the clarification of facts investigated by the Attorney General's Office in Guatemala.
In the course of a trial, defense and prosecuting attorneys may lie, witnesses may lie, the defendant may certainly lie, even the judge may lie. Only the evidence never lies. Conducting multidisciplinary forensic investigations is an expensive endeavor, and as important as it is, the funds needed are allocated to other areas, because after all, for many, the dead are gone, and there are more pressing matters to invest our time and money in. Sad but true. However, for those who lost loved ones, there is no looking forward till they can close that unfinished chapter of their lives, bury their remains, and mourn their loss. The possibility of being able to empower those families is the reward for the employees of this institution, whose passion goes beyond the practice of their specific fields.
Una de las satisfacciones mías de trabajar acá.
In my job here, one of my satisfactions is as a human being. Then comes the other aspect, as an expert in forensic anthropology, being able to shed light on the truth, therefore helping the judicial system in any of its forms.
Mucha satisfacción. ¿Por qué?
I feel a great satisfaction because in many cases there are a lot of expectations from the family members, and when you can identify a person and they can give their families a proper burial and have somewhere where they can put the flowers and visit, these people have waited a long time for this.
It is this passion that maintains this institution in a moment in time where generous hearts are in short supply and the world is in an economic crisis. FAFG finds itself fighting to keep their mission while extending a helping hand to government bodies, such as the Attorney General's Office and other national institutions.
Es un excelente trabajo el que han realizado.
I believe that the work that the FAFG does is excellent, and with the new genetics lab and the DNA lab that they now have, it has given us, the surviving relatives, the hope we need to continue the search for our loved ones. I believe that without the FAFG and their dedication to their work, we would have lost all hope to find our loved ones.
In their hope to continue to provide the best and cutting-edge technology for their principal endeavor, the FAFG continues their expansion, adding new departments with experts in correlating fields and contributing in the investigation and education in other Latin American countries.
Con nosotros tenemos una metodología propia.
We have developed technology that works very well for the needs of our cases here in Guatemala, but that with some small adjustments can be used in any country in the world because of the high level of professional expertise.
Looking into the future, there are newer and brighter accomplishments to be seen as the science advances and the Foundation broadens its horizons to include newer ways to not only help their principal mission of unveiling new sites of mass graves in order to reunite families with the remains of their loved ones, but also help in an unbiased way to resolve cases not only in Guatemala but across the borders. Obtaining the proper certifications has been key to ensure that all the results of their arduous work in the field and in their labs is accepted without doubt all over the world. To that extent, and in recognition of this work, they have been invited to lecture and to work in several countries that have suffered civil unrest and many cases of disappearances. But at the end of the day, What has been most satisfying for them has been to be able to shed light onto a dark chapter in the past history of Guatemala and to instill hope and confidence in their population and empower them to continue the search for truth and justice.
The country has changed and people have lost their fear to a certain degree and have also began to trust this work. And in a small way, are now even beginning to trust their authorities, like the Attorney General's office. People are now beginning to trust it. They're beginning to see that things might work. They're beginning to see some trials as well. They're beginning to see people taken to court and accused of these crimes. Something I think I have to include myself in this. We never imagined that could happen in Guatemala.
As those who study them have come to learn, bones make good witnesses. Although they speak softly, they never lie, and they never forget.